So I got a question for you. Was the verdict of Derek Chauvin about blind justice or was it about social justice? What's up, my friends? I pray you guys are blessed in the Lord, that you are standing strong in your faith. Now, it's been a while since I put out a video. I just finished another book, and so a lot of times it just consumes my time to meet a big deadline. So I've missed having these times with you to engage you on cultural matters, because as you know, on this channel, it's about looking at what's happening not just in the culture, in the church, in the family, in your personal life. What does the Bible talk about? Christian apologetics. But as a Christian, that we look at the world in the lens of God's truth and understand it. And that's what I'm going to do on today's video, is talk about the difference between blind justice and social justice. To be more specific, I say blind justice over social justice, because as you and I have been now inundated with all of this stuff happening left and right about the verdict of Derek Chauvin, and people are emotional. And there are some people who stand by the verdict, and there are other people who think that justice was not served. Now, according to NPR, the jury has found former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin guilty on all three counts. Now, these are the three counts. He's been found guilty of unintentional second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. Now, I know a lot of people, they feel that justice was served on all three counts, that he should have been found guilty in all three counts. There's other people who say maybe on one count. A lot of voices out there, people that I do respect, said he should not have been found guilty on the unintentional second degree and third degree, but he should have been convicted on the second degree manslaughter. I'm not an expert. I'm not a lawyer. I didn't watch all the court cases. From what I've gathered looking at the evidence, I know for a fact what Derek did, I think for the most part, was wrong. And so he had his day in court and he was found guilty. Now, should he have been found guilty on all three counts? I don't know that, to be honest. That's not a cop-out. I just don't know, because I don't know the evidence overall. My main purpose, but I do think he was guilty and should have been found guilty to some degree. And again, he is found guilty, and we pray that will bring relief to his family to some degree. It doesn't bring him back, but I will say this, and this is why I'm putting out the video as a Christian. Derek Chauvin was not being tried because he's a racist. There was no evidence that was presented that I know for a fact. And trying to convict him as a white supremacist or something. We know, based on looking at the footage, based on what some eyewitnesses, of course, he took the fifth, so he was not cross-examined, and he has a right to do that. But he did not go there that we know of, looking specifically, obviously, for a black man to kill. Now, what he landed up doing to George Floyd, we know is wrong, and that's why, a jury of his peers found him guilty. And we have to trust in that. And so I'm going to give you guys two different perspectives from two different black Americans. One of them is a Christian. One of them professes to be one. I don't think that's truly the case, not because of these quotes, but just because of other things. But the first person I want to introduce to you is Senator Tim Scott. Of course, he's not on the show. This is just a picture of him. But listen to what he says in response to the verdict that came out. This is what Tim Scott says. He says, "We must all come together to help repair the tenuous relationship between law enforcement and black and minority Americans. To deny the progress we've made is just as damaging as not making progress at all." Now, I agree with Tim Scott. See, that is a man who's saying, listen, justice was served. We got to come together, because we know there's going to be a lot of division, and there's going to be a lot of people who are still going to be upset about it. So let's just try to move forward, and let's bring healing to the situation. But that's not what Maxine Waters, welcome to the show, Maxine Waters. No, she's not on the show. But that's not what she thinks. She has a different perspective. Now, there's two different quotes I'm going to give you that she said in two different rallies, two different times. But this speaks to Maxine Waters and what, she's trying to do within the Black Lives Movement. And I think this is very dangerous. And this is why I want to put out the video, because I think what happens is it's not about blind justice. It's about social justice. It's about forcing people to do what you want them to do because they use identity politics. Well, she says this about identity politics. She says the whole judicial system has been corrupted because of identity politics. And that's just what she's saying is, when you stand before court, they're not seeing whether or not you're innocent or guilty based on the evidence. They're going to presume your innocence or that you're guilty based on the color of your skin, or based on your gender, or based on how much money you have, or who you know, etc. That's what she's saying. Now, has that happened in the court of law before? Yes. But you know what's above that is the rule of law. But she's saying the whole thing is corrupt. I don't buy that, you guys. Notice what else she says. We've got to stay in the streets and we've got to demand justice. We're looking for a guilty verdict in regards to Derek Chauvin. And if we don't, notice, we cannot go away. We've got to get more confrontational. You guys, that's violence. That's social justice. That has nothing to do with blind justice. This is what we demand. Now, again, I side with him in the fact that Derek Chauvin was guilty. Clearly what we all witnessed in that horrific video is a man who's wearing a badge, who's there to serve and protect, used his position of power to take an innocent life. But the thing that we have to understand, this is so true as Christians, is that justice is not vengeance. Justice is not vengeance. And what you have with the social justice side, don't be confused, and we shouldn't be confused, because it has the word social, which implies, gathering together, being nice and friendly, with the term justice by it. I'm not saying all forms of social justice are wrong, but in this case, social justice is wanting vengeance. But you know what the Bible says in Proverbs 24, verse 29? It says this: I will do to him as he has done to me. I will pay the man back for what he has done. You guys, here's the bottom line. We cannot afford the oppression in our country that we're seeing lead us down a path of suppressing the truth. When you have oppression, you have suppression. In any way, shape, or form, you guys, that's wrong. I don't care who's doing it, it is wrong. No one is above the rule of law. And we all know this because we all believe in an absolute standard of justice. Even if somebody is a relativist, they still believe that it is absolutely wrong to lie to them, to steal them, or to take their life without them saying it's okay. Because there is a standard of justice. And because there's an ultimate standard of justice, of course, I believe as a Christian theist, it's God. He's the moral lawgiver. And if there's a moral law, there has to be a moral lawgiver. And we see the moral law that's written all over the place. And we see, in effect, parts of it being exercised in our judicial system. So the point is, when you have an ultimate standard of justice, there is an authority there, you guys, that's put in place on a civic level, on a governmental federal level, right? And the purpose of these institutions is to advance justice. Now, of course, there are people who will use the authority that they've been given, whether they've been elected in, whether they be a judge, whether it be a law enforcer, whether an FBI agent, whatever the case may be, a legislator in Congress or Senate, even the President of the United States, Vice President, or somebody in the cabinet. They will use their position of power for themselves, for their own gain. And they will oppress people along the way. And the worse it gets is a dictatorship. It's about totalitarianism, right? And we know forms of governments that are communistic, that's how they rule. They rule over their people that way. And what makes America so great is we believe in liberty and justice for all. Because our founders believe in that absolute standard of justice. And as a result, because we're made in the image of God, George Floyd, all of us, you and me, we have the imago Dei. There's intrinsic value in you and there's intrinsic value in me. And our founders knew that. And so when they wrote the Bill of Rights, mainly James Madison putting it together, this was an immeasurable leap, you guys, to protect the rights of every American citizen. These were rights that guaranteed the security and opportunity for people in America to live life to its fullest. Now, of course, even at that time, no doubt, not all Americans were able to be, to live out the Bill of Rights, even though liberty and justice for all, not for some, liberty and justice for white people, but the vast majority of the white people had the type of justice that the black people that were living in America should have had from day one. Now, remember, the philosophical truth, the moral truth was there. It just was not being given. And that's so wrong, you guys, because they're referred to inherent rights, you guys, or natural rights, are also identified as God-given rights, not government rights. The government enacts justice to protect the God given rights that come from our Creator. Our founders believed strongly in the dignity and the equality of each and every person. And we have to be talking about these things more, you guys, and not succumb to certain movements that will eventually taint our justice system based on social justice. We have to continue to fight for our justice system to remain blind, meaning we don't look at someone's gender, we don't look at someone's ethnicity, we don't look at someone's background, we don't look at their education. We all have natural rights from the natural order ordained by God, and we need to fight for these God-given gifts at all costs. So when you and I look at the central purpose of our government, it's to promote the general welfare of all people by protecting its citizens from any harm that seeks to destroy the way of life. And when we lose that, you guys, our freedoms will be tossed out because we'll have anarchy. In order for freedom and justice to prevail, in order to preserve you guys intact, justice to be blind, to remain blind, and for all of us to have equal rights among each and every one of us, is we have to pray that for our government. We have to, and if you're listening and if you are in government, thank you for your service. If you feel called to run for office or whatever on a local level, state level, federal level, God bless you to give you strength, because we need more and more Christians who will use the government as God has given us as an institution to give the best, to provide services to help society's health and security and long-term viability. That's the role of the government. Now, real quickly before I wrap things up, the other two things we have to be praying and looking at too, with a Christian perspective, with a Christian worldview, is public safety. Because you see these police officers, and you guys, there are a lot of bad apples out there. But we have to remember that public safety exists to keep the peace, but if necessary, to enforce the law. And sadly, in some cases, and I have some friends who have served in the military and who have patrolled the streets and still do, and I pray for them, and I encourage you to pray for them as well. They've had to use lethal force because someone was a danger to themselves and to people around them. And oftentimes the police are called because of domestic violence, domestic dispute. And sadly, there are times where police officers get there too late. Okay, there are times they can prevent crime from occurring or a violent act from occurring, or it's in the process of unfolding. It could have been far worse if they didn't intervene. And there's times in the case of Derek Chauvin where they go too far. And he was found guilty for that. The last thing is about judges, you guys. Judges is another reminder. We praying for our judges, because judges, they don't possess these powers that are above the law. When they reside over the courts, they're conduits of God. And they've been given by God to, they've been erected in society to uphold the law and to enforce justice. And so with this power comes great responsibility. Remember Spider-Man? But just because judges are privileged to reside over the court of law, that doesn't give them absolute power over the law. Let me just say this in closing. Judges are not rulers who can usurp the people's power and revoke their constitutional rights. Rather, judges ought to be models that stand for right and wrong before all people. And let's pray that be the case. Because ultimately, you guys, Derek Chauvin stood before, and the sad thing is George Floyd was not given this right because his life was taken, which is far more important than having his day in court. But Derek Chauvin stood before the jury of his peers, and we saw that justice remained blind. Okay, I'm not saying in all accounts, but overall we saw that justice remained blind. And we got to remember that a person's ethnicity, color, and gender should never be on trial. We all, as American citizens, under the 6th and 7th Amendment of the Bill of Rights, have a right to stand before a judge or our peers, right? And to hear the evidence. Thomas Jefferson said, "I consider trial by jury as the only anchor ever yet imagined by man, by which a government can be held to the principles of its Constitution." You want to preserve the Constitution? We got to protect jury trials. We have to protect people, you guys like you and me, We, the people who make up the government. Because jury trials, you guys, here's a few things to close with. Jury trials uphold our strong judicial system. Jury trials keep certain checks and balances in preventing corruption to happen in the government or the government exerting too much power. Because here's a great thing with jury trials, it's we the people. We are a powerful voice who speak into our justice system. We look at the evidence and we say guilty or not guilty. We have that right. And we have to be exercising that, you guys. And I pray that we will continue to do that. So I pray this video has helped kind of give some perspective. I know it's a mess, you guys, in this fallen world. And there's a lot of issues that are still unfolding, but I pray that you will be a voice of reason in the midst of all this, that you continue to pray that God will use our justice system, that we remain blind, that we don't just come to presume people are guilty before we hear the evidence, but we give people that right to be heard, to look at the evidence, and pray for anybody who's being oppressed, that that will end as well, that God would use you to speak up for those who are feeling oppressed, regardless of their belief, regardless of their color, regardless of what movement they're a part of. You and I are the Imago Dei, all of us. And we need to show dignity and respect because we're losing that. And in the process, it's affecting our social justice, our justice systems. So I hope this helped you guys. Thank you guys for watching. Until next time, keep standing strong, my friends.